Good afternoon. I am Diane Rolfe, and I am president of the PDC. This is a great election year, 2012. We are so very pleased to have a record PDC legislative luncheon today. The last record was 106. Well, today we have 200. I think this is because we have one of the foremost American statesmen, a great progressive. In fact, many people consider the greatest progressive in the United States, Senator Russ Feingold of Wisconsin, as our speaker. He is a man who does not need a long introduction. We all know he served Wisconsin for 18 years as a most highly respected and regarded senator. But some of you may not know, however, what brings him to our area. We are fortunate that Senator Feingold is spending the winter quarter at Stanford as the very first Mimi and Peter E. Haas distinguished visitor at the Haas Center for Public Service because, and I quote the Stanford provost, of his deep commitment to protecting the democratic process for all citizens. Another reason he was chosen as a Haas Distinguished Visitor was because he was a recipient in 2011 of the Roosevelt Institute Four Freedoms Award, given for promoting economic and social justice and building a dynamic American democracy that served all the people. His principal crusade has the ultimate goal, the hope that he can help spark a new progressive movement that will revitalize our democracy for many years and centuries to come. And he needs all of us in this room to help that happen. When he left the Senate in 2010, he founded Progressives United. You have materials on your table now about Progressives United to be the vehicle by which our democracy can be strengthened and, yes, saved. I think it's appropriate that I leave the podium and let Senator Feingold tell you the further story of Progressives United and the hope for America's future. Senator Feingold.
Thank you, Diane, very much. What a wonderful crowd, and what a warm greeting I got from so many of you coming in here. It is very exciting to see the enthusiasm of the Peninsula Democratic Coalition, and I got to tell you, it's been pretty fun to be in California since New Year's Eve. Since I left the Senate, I had the opportunity to have a great experience teaching law at Marquette Law School in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. It's a great facility, great law school. I also had a chance to write a book, which is coming out on February 21st, called While America Sleeps. It's my answer to Bush and Cheney and Rumsfeld and Condoleezza Rice about what happened in the 10 years after 9/11. I hope you will read it. Somebody has to talk about the other side of what happened. Diane said, I've also formed with allies of mine this group called Progressives United that I'll be talking about. So I had a pretty full plate already. Then this letter came in. Would I like to spend a quarter at Stanford? And I said, well, like one time a year. And they said, you choose. I said, I think I'll do the winter quarter. See how smart we are in Wisconsin? And so I'm here for the winter quarter, and I'm having a fabulous experience. This Haas Center for Public Service is quite a place. One of your members here, Maria Fraboni, works there with the director closely. She made it possible, all the arrangements for me to come out here. And it is a vibrant place. It is a progressive place. It is devoted to public service. They were highly supportive of the Occupy movement on a campus that isn't entirely Occupy movement type of place. And so there is a balance there that the Haas Center provides at this incredibly great university, and I'm very, very happy to be part of this effort that's going on in this area. I just want to say Anna Esho is one of my favorite people that I've ever worked with. What a wonderful human being, and I wish I could have seen her. I miss her. Now, as we talked about, there's a tad of a Wisconsin invasion going on. I mean, I'm from Wisconsin, Clark's from Wisconsin, Maria is from Wisconsin, and Mark's mom is from Wisconsin. So the first 4 people that I'm sitting with there, all from the great state of Wisconsin. I expected when I came out here that I'd be rooting for the Badgers against Stanford in the Rose Bowl. Instead, we had to lose it, as the day you guys lost to Oregon. I thought the Packers would be playing the 49ers in Green Bay. So then I switched to the 49ers, and that didn't go so well. But still, of course, it is very, very good to be here, and I'm having a wonderful time. Now, let me just say a few words about what Progressives United's been doing, but then I'm going to relate it to the more fundamental issue of why. Why are we doing these things? Why is it called Progressives United? I think you can figure that out. It's a response to one of the worst Supreme Court decisions in the history of the United States of America. But we have tried. We have tried this year, for the first year, to try to use the fact that we have some 300,000 people that have signed up on our list who are willing to communicate instantaneously on an issue to challenge some of this stuff that's going on because of the power of big money in this country. The first issue we weighed in on occurred just as we were founded. As we were founded in mid-February, around Valentine's Day a year ago, all hell broke loose in Wisconsin.
Yes, that's true.
The right in our country, funded by the Koch brothers in Texas, decided to take away our state's collective bargaining rights for public employees. We were the state that started collective bargaining for public employees, so this was offense against everybody in the state of Wisconsin and every working person in the United States of America. So Progressives United raised money for the cause. We helped people with the rallies, and it was an amazing response. The largest rallies in the history of our state. And, I was involved in those anti-war rallies on campus in the 70s. Those were big to us at the time, but they were tiny. They were second only to the Berkeley rallies. But they were tiny compared to the rallies on behalf of the working people. So we were integrally involved in that. Then we realized that the president, and I'm a big fan of the president, I'll be talking about that, but just because we're a fan of the president, we don't automatically agree with everything he does, and we weren't happy that Jeff Immelt, the CEO of General Electric, was the head of the President's Competitiveness Council. Now, you know what GE does. GE is the one that trains companies how to ship jobs overseas. And he recently complained that, unlike Switzerland and Germany, how come the people of this country, the workers of this country, don't root for their corporations? And we said back to them, well, as soon as you stop shipping our jobs overseas, we'll be cheering again, but not until. We're not going to cheer for a company and a situation and a presidential appointee who is not, and the company wasn't even paying taxes. And they were increasing the CEO's compensation. So we weighed into that. You remember the so-called super committee. We didn't really like the super committee because it looked like there for a while they were going to sell us down the river, that they were going to cut Medicare and Medicaid and not ask the very wealthy to contribute at all. Well, out of 200,000 communications that went into the super committee saying don't do this, Progressives United provided over half, over 100,000 of those communications from our list. Finally, as this whole Wall Street thing continues and the Occupy movement grows, we heard that the Attorney General of New York was pointing out that a deal that various Attorney Generals were going to make to kind of get these various banks off the hook on the mortgage deal, the Attorney General of New York said it's not a good deal. And people were mad at him. So I called him up and I said, you're right, stick to your guns. And he fought this thing, and we backed him up. And fortunately, that sort of an agreement has not been made, and the President has now appointed Mr. Attorney General Schneiderman to head the investigation that is long overdue of Wall Street. It's long overdue. It should have happened a long time ago. So that's what we're working on. But those are the specifics. What started this whole thing? Well, you know that we didn't have campaign finance laws in this country during the so-called Gilded Age, the late 19th century. The so-called robber barons dominated our system, and we're beginning to dominate our political system. So the progressives and the populists got together and demanded that a law be passed in 1907. It's called the Tillman Act. The Tillman Act said corporations can't use their treasuries, you know, the stuff you buy from them, for political campaigns. The law of the land for 100 years. Then in 1947, people said, conservatives, business people said, all right, now the unions are powerful. Unions shouldn't be able to do it either. So they passed the Taft-Hartley Act. For 60 years, unions couldn't use their treasuries. In other words, they couldn't use mandatory union dues for political purposes. They had to raise it separately, and they did, and form political action committees. No one ever suggested to me that this wasn't valid law. I'd never heard such a thing. I saw a lot of ugliness in the campaign finance system, of course, as I was first running and won an underdog race. You know, in 1992, I had to get Elvis Presley to endorse me, and he'd been dead for 20 years. I mean, you know, it was difficult because I had no resources. But when I came to Washington, you know, the system was not completely out of control yet, but senators were spending huge amount of time dialing for dollars. You see senators in the airport exhausted from campaign trips around the country. They weren't ready for their amendments the next day. But then it went to another level, and unfortunately it was through the Clinton-Gore administration. President Clinton and Al Gore decided that you could do soft money contributions, which really had only been not for TV but for get out the vote. They said, oh, looks like we can do phony issue ads with this. So they opened that Pandora's box, and both parties jumped in. And as a result, we had Democrats as well as Republicans voting for trade agreements that sent our jobs overseas because of soft money. We had Democrats and Republicans voting for a Telecommunications Act that actually consolidated the media in this country and radio and TV in a way that we've never seen. We had Democrats and Republicans alike voting to repeal the Glass-Steagall Act, which was the one thing that prevented banks and investment houses from being integrated with each other. Needless to say, I voted for none of these, or I probably wouldn't be talking about it. But these were huge money giveaways because of the soft money system. Soft money means unlimited contributions to the political parties. So McCain and I got together and worked for 8 years, and we managed to pass, after 8 years, the McCain-Feingold bill, which banned the heart of the bill was to prohibit those contributions, unlimited contributions, $500,000, $1 million contributions by corporations or unions to the political parties. Now, the Supreme Court upheld that, and you may be surprised to hear it's still the law. But it's all that's left. The whole foundation that we built it on, we figured, okay, corporations and unions can't do this. We don't want people being able to go around Bend here and do it by giving unlimited contributions to political parties. Well, we actually reached a point in 2008 where things were actually getting better. Not only did we win, which was great, but how did we win? There were no unlimited contributions to the parties. And what else was happening? The internet was exploding for political contributions. $10, $20, $25 contributions from college students, from older people who couldn't even leave their house without assistance, got on the internet and said, I'm sending you $10. And then what happened? It wasn't just the money. It was a huge amount of money that was raised that way. But an email would go out to this person, hey, would you like to help us address some envelopes? Would you like a ride into the headquarters? Would you like to come to the rally? It was a populist electronic system that really, to me, looked like democracy. It was an exciting moment. The system was changing. And you know what happened? The powers that be in this country didn't like it. Of course they didn't like it. Corporate powers in this country saw the face of democracy, and they were terrified. So what did they do? They engineered a Supreme Court decision. I don't know exactly how it happened. I was stunned. You know that Citizens United decision had nothing to do, really, with McCain-Feingold. They could have ruled it on a very simple basis. It was about a movie about Hillary Clinton. McCain, and I know because with my bill, I wrote it. We had no intention of getting at movies on DirecTV. All they had to say was that the bill doesn't apply. Well, they went nuts. They decided, we're going to shut down this huge democratic movement in this country. And so on a 5-4 vote, regrettably written by Californian Justice Kennedy, who I sometimes think does a decent job, the decision was made. And they overruled the Tillman Act, they overruled the Taft-Hartley Act, and now corporations and unions could give unlimited contributions, run ads directly from their treasuries. So what I like to say is, this is all about Democrat and Republican toothpaste. If we're going to have a system where corporations take what you buy at the Safeway and immediately spend it on campaigns, or we buy a gallon of gas, I want to buy from a Democrat corporation, or better yet, a progressive corporation, not a Republican corporation. It's not just horrible for the political system; it's horrible for the economy. They're begging for boycotts. Because why should my money, when I buy a product, be used for something I don't believe in that respect? Well, of course, I remember times when that kind of action worked. There was a time, as I'm sure you remember in California, where you couldn't go to a Democratic fundraiser anywhere in America where grapes were served. Remember why? Because of unity with Cesar Chavez. And people, oh my God, there's grapes in here, get them out of here. So this is what we're on the verge of. And the consequences are obvious. Look, can you imagine Newt Gingrich, the most ridiculous candidate you could possibly think of? He doesn't have any contributors except for one guy who's a casino guy from Las Vegas. And he's winning. They are doing terrible things to each other in those primaries, and sadly, and again, I'm a strong supporter of the president. I would be one of his top co-chairs in the country for his re-election, but his allies have created super PACs too. And my view is we shouldn't be doing that. Some people say, well, you got to fight fire with fire, and you know what? I think it's dancing with the devil. And I think we're going to lose that deal. We're not going to have as much money, and we're going to lose our soul. It will not work, and we really don't have as much money as they do. So I think that's a mistake. But in the end, we have to do something to put this genie back in the bottle. How do we do it? Well, a lot of people are saying we need a constitutional amendment. And although I have always been hesitant about a constitutional amendment in this area, because we've never changed the Bill of Rights in the history of this nation. To do what you have to do on campaign finance would probably involve limiting the First Amendment in a constitutional way. But there are many senators who disagree, many congressmen who think we should. Let me say this. I still can't take that position, but I'm very pleased that people are organizing behind it. Because if that's your approach, it helps the energy. It helps people know how angry people are with their having their democracy taken away, that they're talking about a constitutional amendment. So I think the organizing behind that is good. And there's even talk about doing it a different way, which is to change the 14th Amendment definition of personhood to say corporations aren't persons. The odds of ever passing a constitutional amendment are tiny. But there's another way. One vote. It was a 5-4 decision. I know people say the guys on our side are older and they have more illnesses, but that's not up to us. It's up to somebody else, or resignation. We have to be ready with a Democratic president named Barack Obama over the next 5 years to make sure that the next couple of Supreme Court appointments are made by President Obama. That is the way that Citizens United will be overturned and we will get our democracy back. So that's the big one. But in the meantime, we can't just go, all right, let's win the election. You already know there are legislative things that have to happen. You're working on it here. They have to pass the Disclose Act in Washington so that these guys have to say who they are. You know, the Supreme Court said 8-1, only Clarence Thomas didn't vote for this one, that you can have disclosure. And the Republicans always said when we did McCain-Feingold, they said, Russ and John, we are all for campaign finance reform, but it should just be disclosure, not banning unlimited contributions. So sure enough, this decision comes down, and they said, all right, let's have a vote on it. Let's finally let it go through. And Al Franken saw Mitch McConnell go up there to vote, and he voted no, after he had been the guy saying, you know, all we need is disclosure. And so he said, Mitch, let me read you a quote that you said about this. And, you know, you don't want Al Franken to get his teeth into you. But McConnell, the leader of the Senate, just walked away. You got to hear Al tell the story. Anyway, so the Disclose Act is essential. And so is the Disclose Act here in California that I just signed a petition for. They said it was okay, even though I'm not actually in California. So it needs to be done right here in the great state of California and in every state in the United States of America. We also need public financing of all campaigns. We've never had it for Congress. It isn't worked for the presidential campaigns. It has to be restored. We also need to get rid of the Federal Elections Commission. It's a joke. They do not enforce the law. They have 4 Democrats and 4 Republicans, and they don't enforce violations. It's so crazy that when the staff voted for certain violations against Democrats, the Republicans voted against the violations against Democrats because they don't want any campaign finance laws at all. So these are some things that we must do and that we can do. And as you go forward in the coming weeks and months in this campaign, I've said this to the president's people, I want to say it to you, this issue of money in politics, this issue of corporate domination of our economy, this second gilded age on steroids is not something to be added on a list of 9 or 10 items. We have to talk about jobs, and the president did a brilliant job the other night of doing that. We have to talk about the deficit. But if you're going to pick 3 or 4 things to talk about, this issue of stopping Citizens United has to be mentioned at every stop, every turn, every speech, every time. Please help me do that. And thank you so much for having me here today at your meeting. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Okay. Okay, please remember one sentence. If you have a question for Senator Feingold, please raise your hand now. That nice lady there.
What are you doing to stop the wars and restore a peace economy?
What am I doing to stop the wars? Well, before the Tea Party came along, I was leading the charge on that issue in the United States Senate and the U.S. Congress. I was the first senator to ever propose a timeline to get us out of Iraq. I proposed it in 2005, and we finally got it done in 2011, I guess, 2012. But also, even under President Obama, there's 2 big things that I really disagree with the president. And again, I will be working for him every day, because I agree with him on so many things. One is, I didn't like this ramping up the troops in Afghanistan. I thought it was a bad decision. We need to get out of there, and we need to get out of there now. This does not make sense anymore. It is a foolish move. It is playing into the hands of the extremists in Pakistan and Afghanistan. And frankly, the tone the president's taking suggests to me that he agrees. But it's got to get done quickly. So in terms of the resources, that's where the huge battle is that whatever resources we save, have to be, in my view, contributed to the causes that have been neglected and hurt so badly in the last couple of years because of the economy and because the tax status of very wealthy people has been protected. And so to the extent that, and that is real money, we've spent well over $1 trillion on these wars, and it's all been deficit spending. You know, it was never paid for. One of the first amendments I ever did when the war in Iraq started is I said on the floor of the Senate, I said, why can't we pay for this? We know we're going to war next week, right? Well, you never know, so we're not going to pay for it. So I offered the amendment after the war started, and they simply exempted. So it's not just, of course, a disaster because they weren't good decisions. It's not just a disaster because those resources aren't used for other things. It is one of the reasons that we have these large deficits in this country. And that was not done by Barack Obama, despite what the Tea Party tells you. He wasn't president then.
Next question, please.
Somebody has to ask it. Is there any possibility you'd consider running for governor of Wisconsin?
You know, I was in elective office for 28 years in a row, which ended a little over a year ago. I think it's best for me and my family that I take a break. So I'm not running for office this year, either for the U.S. Senate or governor. But we do intend to get a new governor in Wisconsin. And we think we can. So I will be helping out through Progressives United, but I'm not running for office this year.
On your list of 3 or 4 things, how do we manage not to lose the Senate this year?
Absolutely right. When I talk about the need to overturn Citizens United, we can't do it if we don't have a Senate that will confirm a decent Obama appointee. Now, it looked very bleak with regard to the Senate a few months ago. But as the sort of Washington Insider newspapers are reporting now, it's looking a little better. We think we can elect Tammy Baldwin in Wisconsin to keep that seat in a Democratic hand. Our organization, Progressives United, our first endorsement was for the next senator from the great state of Massachusetts, Elizabeth Warren. And in a few days, we raised her $150,000 in small contributions. Probably some of you, she's fantastic, as you know. So those are a couple of the places where we think we'll do well. It will be close. It's a year that's kind of tilted against us. But, you know, they got a problem now. They were looking pretty good 2 years ago when they had no responsibility. But everybody knows they've been complete obstructionists. So it'll be a battle. It's critical that we keep the Senate, and I'll be going to different places around the country to campaign for, you know, people like Maria Cantwell and others, as well as some of our challenger candidates. So I think we can do it, but it will be very, very close.
This side of the room.
So the flip side of issues about personhood are some of these personhood issue amendments or whatever that are coming up in these states having to do with when life begins. And I'm concerned that that is an issue that's being introduced in a number of different states, and that's going to draw out people for the November election as gay marriage did, whatever it was, 8 or 12 years ago. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I mean, you see my reticence on this whole constitutional amendment thing. I should have mentioned when I mentioned the personhood thing, because it's a clever idea in some ways. Other people want to do other things with the personhood concept. And amazingly, it was rejected in Mississippi, of all places. You know, but and when you start messing around with the Constitution, it is better not to do these things through the Constitution because of the unintended consequences. This is such a violation of our system of government that it's understandable that people are thinking about it and even advocating it. But I do have concerns about that, and actually talked about this in the courses I was teaching at the law school last year. So we need to be very careful how we proceed on that.
So, is there anything we can opportunity to shorten the presidential election cycle? I mean, why does it have to go on for like 2 years?
Well, you know, there's obviously an element of supply and demand here. There's nothing you can do to prevent CNN and Fox from having 5,000 debates. You know, it seems ridiculous to me, and I can't quite imagine how anybody would want to go through all those debates. But, you know, because of the rather interesting nature of the Republican candidate, it's kind of become a reality show. You know, so I don't know whether it would always work like that. Now, in terms of the practical way, public financing could have that effect. See, what public financing is all about is you agree not to spend an unlimited amount of money in order to get the public financing. That means you can't spend all kinds of money. That means unless you're foolish and spend all your money early and, as they say, go dark at the end because your money's all gone, you don't have any TV ads in October, public financing has a voluntary capacity to limit it. Strict limits, can't do it under the First Amendment. You know, in England they have a different system. They say we're going to have an election, and of course it goes through the parties, it's a whole different deal. I think we need to do it through the mechanism of voluntary limitation on spending, and that would have that impact.
Senator Feingold, when you started your remarks, you talked about several things that had happened during the past year that had upset you a lot. There was something that happened in December that you did not mention, which upset me quite a bit, which was the passing of the National Defense Authorization Act, which for the first time has a provision for the military to arrest and detain indefinitely, without trial, without representation, Americans, even Americans in the United States. So if Dick Cheney, for example, were president and he thought that we were engaged in a terrorist act here, he could have come in and arrested us. My question is, how do you feel about this? And how could it be that the overwhelming majority of the Democrat-controlled Senate voted for this and President Obama signed it? How did this happen?
That's a good question.
You couldn't be more right. I have been in a situation. Repeat the question. Unfortunately, the National Defense Authorization Act authorized indefinite detention of people in this country. You know, I've been there before where the Democrats and Republicans all vote for something. It was called the USA Patriot Act, which I was the only person to vote against. And I believe I was the only person in the Senate when I was there to strongly disagree with President Obama's endorsement of indefinite detention. It is unconstitutional. It is wrong. It has no place in the United States of America, and I couldn't possibly agree with you more. I'm very sorry that that's been proposed. And a few minutes ago, I was talking about the two things that upset me about the president, even though most of them are great. One was Afghanistan. The other is he has not done what he said he was going to do on civil liberties. He has not yet. Second term, I'm hoping, but there's no place for this indefinite detention thing. That is not our system.
Okay, I better call upon Joe Rolfe. He's my husband. I'll never hear the end of that.
Very, very wise move.
Only if you want to rock.
Last one.
Okay. Greg Lowe mentioned taking back the Senate, but there are 20 Democrats, I believe, up for re-election, and only 12 Republicans.
Right.
And also,
that's the problem.
What about the House?
I mean, that is the problem in the Senate. The fact that we got a shot at it under that circumstance is amazing. The House, I think it's going to rise or fall with the president. And I'll tell you, the other day when I saw him singing the Al Green thing, I thought, this guy's feeling pretty good. We all know this has been a good few days. I think things are moving in the right direction. I think they're going to move in such a good direction. I mean, 22 months in a row, actually, of increasing private jobs in this country. How long can people keep saying that nothing is changing? He's done a beautiful job on international policy. Other than my disagreement on Afghanistan, this guy understands the rest of the world. He's doing a good job not only of protecting America, but also improving our reputation throughout the rest of the world. The Republicans don't want to talk about that, but the competence is obvious. And it's important for the future of our children and grandchildren that we have a president who actually understands this stuff. I think this all can come together. I think people are tired of being down in this country. I think Barack Obama will be reelected, and I think he will bring with him the majority in the House of Representatives. Let me thank you and just say I'm hiring these two for all my appearances. Thanks so much.
Thank you.